Welcome back to Night Stories from VHS Era, the place where memories of the 90s gently drift like the sound of cicadas on a warm summer night. Let me ask you something. Do you remember what it felt like to arrive at your grandma's house for the summer, suitcase in hand, no phone buzzing in your pocket? Did you ever bring your favorite toys and imagine a whole world waiting for you there? Have you ever stepped into a home that smelled like love, where the furniture never changed and time seemed to move slower? If you have, then I think you'll want to stay with me tonight, because in this story, we're going back there, all the way back to a time before updates and apps, when we updated our world with crayons and our imaginations, when all we needed was a little suitcase full of action figures, Polly Pockets, and maybe our trusty Game Boy if we were lucky. Stay until the end of this video to find out how one simple arrival turned into a summer I never forgot, and how that scent in Grandma's house still lingers in my memory. Like a lullaby I'll never unlearn, the car ride always felt longer than it really was. Maybe it was the anticipation. I remember sitting in the back seat of my parents' old maroon Ford Taurus, the one with the cracked leather seats that stuck to my thighs. My little suitcase was beside me, decorated with Lisa Frank stickers that were slowly peeling at the edges. Inside, it was like a miniature toy store I had packed with great care, choosing my favorite Ninja Turtles, a couple of Hot Wheels, my Tamagotchi, which was probably already dead, and of course, my sketchbook. I couldn't travel without it. That sketchbook held entire worlds, I remember. Watching the scenery change, suburbs slowly gave way to open fields and winding roads lined with tall oaks. I could tell we were getting closer when the radio lost signal and the only station left was some fuzzy country song my dad would hum. Along with I leaned my head against the window, watching telephone poles flick past like rhythm sticks marking time. And then there it was, her house. A small white bungalow with light blue shutters and hanging flower pots that always looked like they belonged in a storybook. My heart did a little flip every time we pulled into that gravel driveway. You know that feeling, right? Like you were stepping into a different version of yourself, the summer version, the wild and free version. But it was the smell that truly welcomed me that was the real magic, the scent of lemon-scented, polish, old books, cinnamon from cookies she had probably just taken out of the oven, and something else I still can't quite name. It was warm and familiar, like stepping into a hug that had been waiting for me all year. Have you ever missed a smell so much that your heart ached just thinking about it? She met us at the door, her arms open wide, her hair pulled back in that same bun she always wore, and an apron dusted with flour. "You're taller," she'd say every time, and every time I'd laugh because I barely believed it myself. I'd drag my little suitcase behind me, its plastic wheels rumbling over the wooden floor, and make my way to the spare bedroom. That room was mine for the summer, the twin bed with the quilted blanket, the old wooden dresser that creaked when you opened it, and a bookshelf filled with books from decades ago. That room was where adventure began. The toys came out, one by one, placed carefully across the floor, as if forming the beginning of a mission. Each one had a role, a voice, a purpose. I would line up the G.I. Joes like they were preparing for battle, or have Barbie and Ken escape from some fantastical castle I built from books and shoeboxes. I didn't need screens. I had stories in my head, and the house was my theater. The backyard became the jungle, the driveway a racetrack, the kitchen an intergalactic command center. Whenever Grandma handed me a ladle and let me pretend it was a laser sword at night, I'd lie in bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling, the little fan squeaking overhead. Fireflies blinked lazily outside the window, and the sound of frogs from the creek behind the house became my lullaby. I'd imagine stories where my toys went on secret missions in the middle of the night. I'd write them down with my blue gel pen, the kind that sparkled slightly in the light of the old desk lamp. That notebook became my most precious possession, filled with entire sagas only I could tell. Do you remember the sound of a rotary phone clicking back into place? Or the clatter of ice cubes in a tall glass of Kool-Aid, the kind she only made? For me, sometimes she'd add little fruit slices just to be fancy. We'd sit together on the porch swing as the sun began to dip, and I'd talk about anything and everything. She listened like what I said mattered, even if I was explaining the elaborate politics of my action figures, or how I thought the Ninja Turtles should really consider switching to Pepsi instead of pizza. And it was in those conversations, in that peaceful stillness, that I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. No pressure, no time ticking, just summer. So yes, the trip felt long, but once I arrived, time stopped in the best way possible. My imagination took over, and her house became a wonderland. And that smell, that perfect, impossible two-bottle scent, made everything feel safe, made me feel loved. And to this day, when I catch a trace of cinnamon and old books, I close my eyes and I'm there again, suitcase in hand, heart wide open. Did I answer everything I asked at the start? Let's see. Did I remember what it felt like to arrive at Grandma's completely? Did I bring my favorite toys and build whole worlds? Absolutely. And did her home smell like love and comfort and everything good in the world? More than words could ever say. This was only the beginning, because what happened next? That was when the real adventure of the summer began. The first morning after arriving at Grandma's house was always the softest landing into summer. I remember waking slowly, not because an alarm clock blared or because someone shook me awake, but because of something so much gentler. It was the smell drifting through the wooden slats of the door like a whisper, the smell of warm, fresh bread. It mingled with the crisp scent of early morning air and the faint sweetness of wildflowers from the garden. I think that smell might live somewhere permanent in my memory, in a place untouched by time or change. My eyes would flutter open as the first sunlight peeked through the sheer white curtains, casting golden lines across the room. The old ceiling fan was still spinning overhead, slow and steady, making a slight creak with every turn. I didn't mind the sound. It felt like part of the room itself, like a guardian of childhood dreams. Outside the open window, birds were already busy in their morning symphony, their chirping layered over the soft rustle of trees swaying in the breeze. That was my soundtrack. No morning news, no buzzing phone, just the voice of the earth. Greeting the day, I used to lie there for a while, eyes barely open, just listening. Have you ever done that? Stayed quiet on purpose, so you wouldn't disturb the moment. I'd pull the quilt up to my chin and let my senses wake up before my body did. I'd listen for the robin that always sang near the kitchen window, I don't know if it was the same bird every year, but in my mind it was. There was a rhythm to its song, something that felt old and wise. Then there were the doves, softer in their cooing, like they were trying not to wake the flowers. Eventually, I'd stretch slowly, like a cat in a patch of sun, and then sit up in bed. That was when I'd really smell it, the bread. Sometimes she baked banana bread, and the air would be thick with that buttery, sweet scent. Other mornings it was white, bread homemade from scratch, with a crust that flaked just right. And sometimes, if I was lucky, it was cinnamon raisin, and I could already taste it before my feet touched the floor. I'd tiptoe across the room and peek out the window first, my fingers brushing the cold glass. The garden always looked different. In the early light, the flowers stood taller, proud of having survived another night. There was dew on the grass, sparkling like tiny stars had fallen from the sky and settled into the earth. I always imagined fairies coming out at night to sprinkle the garden with magic. I believed in things like that back then. Maybe part of me still does. The hallway smelled like old wood and sunlight, and as I walked through it, I passed the same creaky floorboard that always gave me away. It squealed under my foot, and I'd stop, grinning, knowing that down in the kitchen, Grandma had just smiled. She always knew I was coming. She was always there before me, her hair still pinned up, apron tied tight, standing at the counter like a conductor leading an orchestra. Her hands moved with memory, not needing recipes, not needing timers, just knowing. The oven was open, just a crack, the heat curling into the air, and I could see the loaf resting on a wire rack, steam still rising from its golden crust. She didn't turn around right away. She always gave me a moment to just be there, to just feel it. Then she'd say it every time. "You hungry, sweetheart?" And every time I'd nod, like that question hadn't already been answered by the growl in my stomach and the way my mouth watered just looking at that bread. She'd slice it thick, the knife making that soft crunch as it passed through the crust. Then the butter, real butter, the kind that melted instantly, spread over the warm surface until it pooled at the edges. Sometimes she added strawberry jam, homemade, of course, sealed in those mason jars with the little fabric hats, and handwritten labels. We'd sit at the small wooden table by the window. I always chose the chair closest to the sun, the one where I could see the garden, the bird feeder, and the little path that led to the woods beyond. Grandma would pour us tea, hers with honey, mine with just a splash of milk. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just chewed and listened to the birds. Have you ever eaten something so simple it tasted like peace? That's how her bread felt. Like it didn't just fill your belly, it filled the quiet places in you. The ones that got empty during the school year or when you had a bad dream. It made everything okay again. Sometimes, after breakfast, we'd read. She had stacks of old books, the kind with cracked spines and yellowed pages. She let me pick whatever I wanted. I remember sitting on the porch swing with her, a book in my lap, my legs dangling, a piece of buttered bread still in my hand. She'd read aloud sometimes, and her voice was like a lullaby, even in daylight. On mornings when I didn't feel like reading, I'd go into the backyard and build forts with sticks, or lay in the grass and count clouds. I never once thought about being bored. My mind was always busy with plans. Maybe I'd draw. Maybe I'd write a story about space aliens who came down just to taste Grandma's bread. Maybe I'd build a time machine out of old cardboard boxes and travel to Jurassic Park. Have you ever had mornings like that? Ones that don't demand anything from you, that just let you be. No schedules, no chores, no urgent messages. Just the smell of something baking, the sound of birds, and the steady heartbeat of summer. Sometimes, if the morning was warm enough, we'd bring a second pot of tea out to the porch and sit there while the world quietly woke up around us. Neighbors would wave as they walked their dogs. Bees would begin their work among the roses, and the wind chimes would tinkle with each breeze like soft punctuation to a perfectly written paragraph. Those mornings made me feel like nothing bad could ever happen, like everything was in its place, like love was as real and present as the air I breathed. And maybe it was. The day would stretch ahead, filled with whatever I wanted to make of it. But those mornings, those quiet, warm, delicious mornings, they were the beginning of everything. They were the reason I fell in love with that house, with summer, with slowness. And now, all these years later, when I wake up to a busy phone, digital alarms, and the rush of a grown-up life, sometimes I close my eyes and go back. I go back to that little white bungalow with the blue shutters, the smell of fresh bread curling under the door, and the birds outside reminding me that the world is still beautiful if I just remember to listen. After the warm bread was eaten and the tea had cooled in our cups, the day truly began. Mornings were never rushed at Grandma's house. The sun climbed slow, as if it too enjoyed stretching across the dew-covered grass. There was no need for clocks or reminders. Everything moved at its own pace, and somehow that felt exactly right. It was as though the world knew we were on vacation from reality and decided to take its time for our sake. The garden always pulled me in first. It sat behind the house, a green patch of wonder, filled with rows of vegetables and bursts of color from flowers I still can't name. Butterflies danced like little pieces of sunshine, floating above the blossoms, their wings delicate and slow, and yet impossible to catch unless you moved like a whisper. I tried anyway. Every morning, I'd chase them with the hope of maybe having one land on my finger, even if just for a second. Have you ever chased something knowing you wouldn't catch it just because the chase felt magical? That was what the butterflies taught me, that joy sometimes comes from the trying, not the getting. The tomatoes were my favorite, not because I loved eating them, although Grandma's tomato salad was something else entirely, but because they felt like treasure. I'd wear one of her old straw hats that was far too big for my head and kneel down between the rows of vines. My fingers would brush past the thick green leaves, searching for the ones that had turned the deepest shade of red. There was something satisfying about twisting a ripe tomato from its stem and holding it in my palm, still warm from the sun, smelling like earth and summer. Grandma always had a wooden basket ready for me, lined with an old kitchen towel. I'd fill it slowly, inspecting each tomato like it was a gem. Some were round and perfect, others had odd shapes and scars, and I loved those most. They felt like they had stories, like they had fought to grow. She taught me how to handle them gently, how not to squeeze too tight, how to appreciate the patience it took to bring something from seed to table. Sometimes she'd be beside me, wearing gloves and humming a hymn I didn't know the words to. She talked to her plants like they were old friends, and I never thought it was strange. I'd seen the way the marigolds swayed when she passed, as if nodding back in gratitude. When she wasn't picking or watering, she was simply there, tending, loving, watching. Her presence alone made the garden feel more alive. Other mornings, when I didn't feel like helping, I'd run barefoot through the yard, chasing butterflies or watching the dragonflies skim over the bird bath. The grass would tickle my toes, still wet from the morning dew, and the air smelled sweet and wild. I'd pretend I was a nature explorer, documenting the movements of each insect in a top-secret field journal that existed only in my head, crouch beside the lilac bushes and whisper to ants as if I could learn their secrets. Have you ever spent a morning completely lost in your own world, where every leaf and pebble felt important? That garden gave me permission to do just that. Some days, I'd lie down beneath the tall sunflowers and look up. They stood like gentle giants, golden faces turned toward the sky, guarding me. From below, the world looked different. The sky seemed bigger, wider, and more open. Clouds drifted slowly, painting stories in white brushstrokes above me. I remember one that looked just like a T-Rex chasing a jelly bean. I laughed so hard I nearly scared the butterflies away. I never once thought about television during those mornings. I didn't ask for cartoons or for something to play on a screen. The world outside was full of its own episodes, unfolding in real time. The slow climb of a snail across a stone, the sudden flash of a bluebird in the feeder, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog as it chased a squirrel, and all of it felt just for me. Grandma always said that the garden taught patience, that nature never rushed, and yet everything always got done. I didn't fully understand it then, but I think I do now. The way tomatoes ripened in their own time, the way butterflies never landed if you ran too fast, the way moments stretched like taffy in the morning sun, sweet and slow and never in a hurry. Sometimes we'd take a break from the heat, under the shade of the old oak tree at the far end of the yard. She'd bring out lemonade, poured into tall glasses with ice that clinked like wind chimes. The condensation would drip down my hand as I drank, and I'd wipe it on my shorts without thinking. We'd sit together on that old quilt she always kept in the basket by the door, talking about what we saw in the garden that day. She'd ask me what the butterflies told me, and I'd answer as seriously as I could. They said the tomatoes are almost ready, I'd whisper, and she'd nod like I'd just told her a secret worth keeping. The time never felt like it moved quickly, but my heart never stopped moving. I'd run, pause, pick, chase, sit, laugh, and wonder, all before noon. The morning passed like a dream that unfolded with every step, and each part of it filled me up in a way I didn't realize I needed until years later. Looking back, those mornings taught me how to notice, how to be still enough to see the butterfly land, gentle enough to hold a tomato without bruising it, open enough to believe in cloud dinosaurs and garden songs. If I close my eyes now, I can still feel the heat of the sun on my shoulders, the dampness of the grass beneath my feet, the weight of the basket in my hand. I can hear her laughter in the breeze and the tiny flutter of wings just out of reach, and I know, in the quietest part of my soul, that those mornings are still happening somewhere. Maybe not in time, but in memory, where tomatoes are always ripe, butterflies always return, and the garden never forgets the sound of a child's heart running free. The afternoons at Grandma's house had a stillness all their own. It wasn't the sleepy kind of stillness, not exactly. It was more like the world holding its breath in the warmth of the sun, pausing just long enough for moments to stretch and settle in your bones. After a morning spent in the garden, running barefoot through grass and laughter, the house became a refuge of calm. That was when the stories would come. They never arrived the same way twice. Sometimes they floated in gently as we sat on the back porch with a bowl of fresh peas between us, our fingers busy but our minds free to wander. Other times they slipped out mid-task, like when we were folding laundry on the sun-warmed bed or matching socks in the cool of the living room. But they always came like clockwork, or maybe magic, and every story she told was better than anything I'd ever seen on TV. We'd sit with the screen door open, letting the breeze carry in the scent of roses and cut grass. The bowl of peas would rest in Grandma's lap, and I'd sit cross-legged beside her with my own smaller bowl. The shells made a soft pop as we split them open, and the peas dropped in with a gentle plink. It was a rhythm, a melody almost. And in between those quiet sounds, her voice would rise. Did I ever tell you about the time the tornado missed our old barn by just a few feet? She'd ask, already halfway into the memory. I always shook my head, even if I had heard it before. I wanted to hear it again, every detail, every word. Her stories painted pictures in my mind, vivid, full of color and feeling. She'd describe how the sky had turned green, how the air grew still like the world was waiting, how the chickens refused to come out of the coop. She'd tell me how she held on to Grandpa's arm, both of them watching the funnel twist in the distance, wondering if they'd still have a roof come morning. And somehow, even the scariest stories felt safe when she told them. She had a way of weaving herself into her tales so that the ordinary became extraordinary, like the time she accidentally dyed all Grandpa's white shirts pink because she forgot a red towel in the wash, or the summer she entered the county fair pie contest and won second place, only to find out the judge was her high school sweetheart who still carried a picture of her in his wallet. I listened to it all, eyes wide, hands moving automatically. As I shelled peas, sometimes I'd forget to drop them in the bowl. So caught up in her words, I'd just sit there holding a pod, letting the peas roll between my fingers. She didn't only tell funny or thrilling stories. Some were soft and quiet, like the one about the night she gave birth to my mom during a thunderstorm. The power had gone out, and the only light came from the oil lamp in the corner of the room. She told it with so much gentleness, as if every second of that memory still lived just beneath her skin. Other days, we'd be folding laundry instead. She'd pull warm towels from the basket, the scent of fresh linen wrapped around us, mixed with the ever-present smell of lemon polish and a hint of her lavender perfume. The sunlight would spill through the window, casting golden patches across the quilted bedspread. We'd talk as we worked, and sometimes I'd ask her questions about things I didn't understand. What was it like before there were computers? I once asked, my voice small, unsure. She chuckled gently, placing a folded sheet on the pile. It was quieter, not better, not worse, just different. People had more time to think, maybe, to notice things, to sit together without needing something flashing in front of them. I liked the way she said it, like the past wasn't something better to escape into, but a room you could visit, a room filled with memories and laughter, and a few old songs humming low in the background. Sometimes she sang as she folded, old tunes from the radio, or lullabies she used to sing to my mom. Her voice was soft, a little weathered at the edges, like a favorite record you never wanted to replace, even when it skipped. I would hum along, not always knowing the words, but feeling them all the same. Have you ever learned something about your family you never expected, just by listening? I remember the first time she told me about her younger brother, the one who went off to war and never came home. She didn't talk about him often, but one rainy afternoon, as we sorted socks in silence, she paused with one in her hand, stared out the window, and said quietly, "He loved the rain, said it made the world feel alive." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just leaned against her arm and let the silence speak for both of us. And there were other stories too. Stories about love letters passed in class, about sneaking out to dance halls, about catching fireflies in jars and making daisy chains on the front lawn. Every one of her stories was a little piece of who she was, and she handed them to me like folded shirts, warm and soft and meant to last. By the end of each afternoon, I'd be full. Not in the way a meal fills you, but in the way a good book does, full of other people's lives, other times, and the deep comfort of knowing where you come from. The peas would be shelled, the laundry folded, but the real gift of those afternoons couldn't be measured in clean clothes or bowls of green. It lived in the spaces between her sentences, in the sparkle of her eyes when she remembered, in the way the sun touched the edges of her hair like it was trying to listen to. So yes, the shows I missed back home on TV were probably full of action and special effects, but nothing ever compared to the adventure of sitting beside her, hands busy, heart open, and ears tuned to the sound of her life. A life lived with joy, sorrow, and a kind of grace I'm still trying to learn. Some of my favorite days were the ones that required nothing more than the backyard and my imagination. No screens, no batteries, no blinking lights, just sunlight, grass, and a heart full of stories waiting to come to life. I didn't know boredom. In that world, the hours were long and the ideas were endless. There was something almost magical about the way time slowed down just enough to let each game bloom fully before drifting into the next dot after lunch. When the sun was high and the breeze moved lazily through the trees, I'd head back outside, usually barefoot and with no plan at all. That's when the best games began. I'd walk to the far edge of Grandma's yard, where the garden gave way to a little clearing full of tall grass, stones, and the kind of sticks that seemed made for adventures. I wasn't looking for perfection. The stick didn't need to be straight. In fact, the ones with curves and knots were better. They had character. They were swords, magic wands, alien communicators, sometimes all three in the same afternoon. I remember one stick in particular. It was long and twisted at the end like a question mark. I declared it the staff of the Forest King and spent 3 whole days ruling an invisible kingdom beneath the trees. My subjects were ants and grasshoppers, and my throne was an old tree stump half covered in moss. I built forts with sticks, lined paths with rocks, and set up pebble barriers against imaginary invaders. It may not have looked like much to anyone else, but to me, it was a fortress of dreams. Have you ever played a game that no one else could see but you? One where every stone had meaning and every stick held power. That's what my afternoons were like. I'd gather smooth rocks and sort them into teams, each one a different tribe in an epic tale of war and peace. Sometimes I'd draw faces on them with a bit of chalk or charcoal. They had names and histories. Some were warriors, some were wise elders, and a few were known for causing trouble. I'd carry them around in my pockets like little friends, placing them carefully around my forts or setting them at the base of trees for secret meetings. The best part was that the world never told me to stop. There were no timers or ads breaking the story. I could stay in my game for hours, talking to myself, making sound effects, even arguing out loud between characters as I crouched behind bushes or stood on top of a rock like a pirate scanning the sea. Grandma would watch me from the porch sometimes, her eyes smiling, never interrupting. She understood, somehow, that these adventures mattered. Occasionally, she'd call out, "You've got grass in your hair, sweetheart," and I'd wave her off, too busy dodging imaginary fireballs or chasing a runaway robot made from 2 tin cans and a bit of string. I built traps for invisible monsters using twigs tied together with yarn I found in her sewing box. I designed obstacle courses with hula hoops and guarding tools, leaping through them like I was training for a top-secret mission. Some afternoons, if the sky turned cloudy and the light dimmed just enough, I'd pretend a storm was coming and I had to build shelter fast. I'd gather sticks and leaves, trying to construct something that could shield my rock friends from the rain. Of course, the rain didn't always come, but that was part of the fun, playing like it might. There was one game I played again and again. I called it Treasure Keepers. I'd bury little items, bottle caps, buttons, shiny wrappers, and make a treasure map using Grandma's old notepad. I'd draw trees, rocks, and landmarks like the Wiggly Worm Spot or Broken Branch Bridge. Then I'd hide the map, wait a few hours, and try to find the treasure as if someone else had buried it. I'd get genuinely excited when I found something I myself had hidden. Isn't that funny? To surprise yourself on purpose. But it worked. It made me feel clever, like I was uncovering secrets of the land I ruled. The world truly was my playground. The backyard became a desert one day, a frozen wasteland the next. I'd use flower petals as potions, acorns as currency, and old shoeboxes as miniature houses for imaginary travelers. I found faces in the bark of trees, saw dragons in the clouds, and swore I once saw a fairy dart past the rose bush. Grandma didn't laugh when I told her. She just said, "You're lucky. They don't show themselves to everyone." I never felt lonely during those games, even when I was the only child around. I had characters, voices, storylines. I had questions to answer, challenges to face, missions to complete. And in the quiet moments between them, I'd lie in the grass and stare at the sky, feeling small and infinite all at once. Have you ever felt so free that the day stretched out in front of you like a blank canvas, and all you needed was a stick to start painting? That's how those afternoons felt, like I was the artist, the director, the explorer. There were no levels to beat, no trophies to earn, just the joy of playing, of making something from nothing. of seeing the world not as it was, but as it could be. Grandma always said that boredom was a gift, that if you sat with it long enough, your mind would take you somewhere far more interesting than any television ever could. And she was right, because in that little backyard, armed with pebbles, branches, and endless curiosity, I traveled galaxies, commanded kingdoms, and befriended creatures no one else could see. The sun would eventually begin to dip, casting long shadows across the lawn, and I'd pack up my treasures, brush the grass from my clothes, and head inside. My hands would be dirty, my knees scraped, and my heart full. And in the fading light, I'd glance back once more at the world I had built, knowing it would be waiting for me tomorrow. Some days, when the sun hung high and unrelenting in the sky, when even the grass seemed to sigh under the weight of the heat, Grandma would peek her head out from the kitchen and ask the question I waited for all summer long. How about a walk to the store, sweetheart? Just like that, the entire day shifted. My heart would flutter with the kind of excitement only a child could understand. Not because of the walk itself, and not even just because of the cold reward at the end, but because of the whole ritual, the quiet magic of a coin in your pocket, and the promise of something sweet waiting at the corner of the world. The store wasn't far, just 3 blocks down, past the mailbox shaped like a red barn, around the house with the peeling yellow paint and the lawn gnome that always looked slightly annoyed, and across the sleepy intersection where cars rarely passed, the sidewalk was cracked and sun-bleached, with tiny weeds stubbornly growing between the seams. I'd skip ahead of Grandma sometimes, my flip-flops slapping against the concrete, the coin in my pocket bouncing with every step. 1 quarter. That was all I needed. Do you remember what it felt like to hold that single coin? It wasn't just money. It was a key, a ticket, a promise. It clinked against your palm with the weight of 1,000 choices. Cherry or orange, grape or blue raspberry, a classic twin pop, or the rocket-shaped one that stained your lips for hours. It was happiness in its most simple, most tangible form. The corner store sat nestled between an old barber shop and a tiny florist, with a faded green awning and a bell that jingled over the door. Stepping inside was like entering another world. The air was cool and smelled like old wood, licorice, and that strange, sweet dust that always seemed to live on the shelves of small-town stores. The floor creaked in all the right places. Rows of candies and chips lined the aisles, and in the back, right beside the soda fridge that hummed like an old lullaby, stood the freezer chest, white, square, humming, and filled with dreams. I'd walk straight to it, lifting the lid with both hands. Cold air would puff out like a whisper from a snowstorm, instantly brushing my face and arms. I'd lean in, squinting through the frost, scanning the frozen treasures inside. There was always the same colorful lineup: red, orange, blue, pink, striped, swirled. The wrappers crinkled with frost and hope. I'd hover my hand over each one, like a wizard summoning power, deciding my fate for the afternoon. Take your time, Grandma would say gently, her hand resting on the counter where she always stood while I chose. She never rushed me. She knew the importance of this decision. Picking the right popsicle wasn't about flavor. It was about mood, about story. Some days, cherry meant you felt bold and adventurous. Other days, creamy orange meant comfort, or grape meant mystery. I didn't always understand my logic, but I trusted it completely. Eventually, I'd pick one, cold and sticky, through the thin wrapper and walk it to the counter like a precious jewel. The store owner, a quiet man with a soft mustache and a voice like sandpaper, would give me a knowing smile and say, "Good choice." He always said that, no matter what I picked. I liked that about him. I'd hand over my coin and he'd drop it into the register with a satisfying clink. No tax, no change. Just a fair trade. One coin, one smile, one popsicle outside. I'd peel the wrapper slowly, letting the cold air kiss my fingers. The first lick was always the best, sharp, sweet, and so cold it made my teeth ache, but I didn't care. I'd eat it slowly on the walk back, the sun melting it faster than I could keep up. It would drip down my wrist, sticky and bright, leaving little trails like colorful memories I didn't want to wipe away. Grandma would laugh and hand me a napkin from her purse, already prepared. We didn't always talk on the way home. Sometimes we just walked, her steps even, my steps scattered. She carried the silence with grace, like it was part of the treat, as if the popsicle wasn't just about sugar, but about slowing down, about tasting the moment. Back at the house, I'd throw the soggy wrapper in the trash, rinse my hands, and go right back to whatever game I had left behind. But something about me was different. There was a coolness in my belly, a little more joy in my step. That one small adventure, that tiny errand, had filled me up in a way nothing digital ever could. Have you ever felt so happy from something so simple you couldn't stop smiling even after it was gone? That's what the popsicle runs were like. They were proof that happiness didn't need noise or speed. Just a coin, a good walk, and someone who loved you enough to make it all feel like the best part of your week. Sometimes I think about that freezer chest. I wonder if it's still there, if the store still hums quietly in the heat of summer. I wonder if there's another child standing in front of it right now, trying to decide between red and orange, knowing deep down that whatever they choose, they're going to remember it forever. Afternoons at Grandma's house held a kind of stillness that wrapped around everything like a soft, invisible blanket. After the popsicle stick had been tossed away, after the last game of the day had lost just enough of its shine, and after the sunlight had shifted to that golden, sleepy angle, the house would begin to invite me into its quietest rhythm. That's when the naps would come, not scheduled or commanded, but offered like a gift from the summer itself. It always began the same way. I'd wander back inside with grass on my knees and sun in my eyes. The moment the screen door creaked shut behind me, the world seemed to slow. The hum of the box fan in the corner was the first thing I noticed, a soft, steady whisper in the hush of the room. It was always placed perfectly, angled just so, sending a warm but welcome breeze across the couch where Grandma had laid out a light cotton blanket, just in case the couch was old in the best possible way. The cushions had given up trying to stay firm long ago, and instead they welcomed you like an old friend, remembering the shape of your body before you even settled in. The floral fabric was a little faded from years of sunlight, but it was smooth and cool, and it smelled faintly of lemon, lavender, and something I could never name but always associated with safety. I never planned to fall asleep. That was the magic of it. I'd stretch out with a book or a toy, maybe still thinking about my morning adventures, or licking the last trace of cherry from my lips. The ceiling fan would spin overhead, slow and hypnotic, its blades slicing the light into quiet ribbons across the floor. The box fan would hum from across the room, a steady companion to the soft creaks of the old house settling into the heat of the day. Have you ever fallen asleep so gently you weren't sure where wakefulness ended and dreaming began? That was how it happened. My body would grow heavy, my eyelids heavier still. The warmth of the afternoon pressed in like the softest quilt, and the gentle breeze from the fan was all I needed. No alarm, no rush, just the steady lull of summer's breath and the feeling that nothing could touch me there. Sometimes Grandma would sit nearby, rocking slowly in her chair, the soft click of her knitting needles adding a quiet rhythm to the moment. She wouldn't speak. She never had to. Her presence was enough. Her company was the kind that said, "You are safe, you are loved, and you are exactly where you should be." Even the sounds outside seemed to respect the nap. The birds quieted to soft chirps. The bees buzzed lazily in the garden. Occasionally, the distant whir of a lawnmower would drift through the open window, blending with the breeze in a way that made the whole world feel like it was humming me to sleep. I remember dreaming during those naps, not wild dreams, not scary ones, but soft, wandering ones. Dreams where I floated above the garden or flew through clouds shaped like animals. Dreams where I walked across fields of stars or found secret rooms in Grandma's house filled with jars of laughter and shelves of old memories that I could open like books. They weren't dreams I ever needed to explain. They were just part of the afternoon, part of the nap, part of the deep exhale that only summer can bring. Eventually, I'd stir, slowly, like a leaf drifting back to earth. The light in the room would have shifted, turning more amber than gold. The air would still be warm, but softer now, touched by the promise of evening. I'd open my eyes, blink a few times, and see the world again as if it had waited patiently for me to return. Grandma would glance over and smile, maybe reaching to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "You needed that," she'd say, and she was right. It wasn't just rest I had found. It was something deeper, something quieter, a kind of peace you can't buy or schedule or stream, a peace that only comes from being truly still, truly cared for, truly home. Have you ever missed a nap from your childhood so much it aches a little in your chest? That's how I feel when I think of those afternoons. I didn't know then how rare it was to nap without guilt, without noise, without the world trying to pull you in 10 directions, to simply close your eyes and drift in the warmth of a room filled with love. Now, in the middle of busy days filled with blinking screens and buzzing phones, I sometimes pause and try to remember the hum of that old fan. I try to feel the give of the couch beneath me, the quiet companionship of the light breeze, the soft weight of the summer sun as it laid across my skin like a lullaby. And sometimes, just sometimes, if I'm lucky and still enough, I can almost hear it, that steady hum, that old gentle sound that once rocked me to sleep while the world outside quietly waited for me to dream. There was a quiet hour in the late afternoon, after the nap and before dinner, when the world outside felt hushed and golden, like it too was catching its breath. It was my favorite time to wander back into the yard, barefoot and slow, with no plan in mind. The sun had softened by then, its earlier blaze now just a warm brush across the tops of the trees, and the sky, oh the sky, opened up like a canvas no one had finished painting yet. I'd stretch out on the grass near the lilac bush, arms behind my head, the earth cool and steady beneath me. The scent of sun-warmed clover and dry soil wrapped around me like an old sweater. From that low angle, the whole world looked different. The trees reached up like cathedral pillars. The blades of grass tickled the sides of my arms, and above me, drifting without urgency, the clouds began their slow and silent show. They came in all shapes and sizes, moving with a grace that made me want to move slower too. Some were fluffy and round like scoops of marshmallow ice cream, others thin and stretched like pulled cotton or long strokes from a lazy paintbrush. But the best part, the part that made those afternoons feel like secrets shared only with me, was the way the clouds could become anything I wanted. Have you ever watched a cloud turn into a dragon, then a whale, then a pirate ship sailing across the sky? I did, over and over. My eyes would scan the heavens like a child hunting for treasure, and the clouds never disappointed. One would look like a galloping horse with a tangled mane, another a smiling face with puffy cheeks and a long, curling beard. I saw castles, superheroes, fish with wings, and once, I swear, an entire parade of elephants marching across the sky. Sometimes I'd whisper stories aloud just to see how far my imagination could go. That one, I'd say, pointing lazily, is a wizard riding a giant eagle. He's headed to the mountains of moonlight to cast a spell that makes flowers sing. No one was around to hear me, and I liked it that way. The clouds and I had an understanding. They gave me shapes, and I gave them stories. We were partners in daydreaming. On quieter days, when even stories felt too loud, I'd just watch them in silence. I'd follow a single cloud from one end of the sky to the other, watching how it morphed, how it stretched and softened and drifted beyond the edge of the world. It reminded me that everything changes, slowly, beautifully, and often without needing any help from us at all. Grandma sometimes joined me, settling in her lawn chair with a book she didn't always read. She'd glance up at the sky every now and then, smiling at whatever shape I pointed out, even if she couldn't see it. "Your eyes see more than mine do," she'd say, not with sadness, but pride. "That's a gift, you know." And I believed her, because in those moments, lying in the grass, the world felt limitless. There were no borders in the sky, no rules about what a cloud could or couldn't be. Everything was possible. A simple patch of blue became a stage for giants, for races between cloud lions and cotton birds, and all I had to do was look. There was something deeply comforting about how slow the sky moved. Nothing rushed, nothing beeped, no notifications, no buzzing distractions, just the sky and its soft rhythm, the breeze brushing my skin like a whisper, and the occasional distant chirp of a bird that seemed to be watching with me. Have you ever had a thought so big it made you feel tiny, and yet perfectly held at the same time? That's what happened when I looked up long enough. I'd realize how vast the sky was, how small I was under it, and how okay that was. Like the universe was gently reminding me that it was all right to pause, to breathe, to imagine, without needing anything but a patch of open sky I didn't need games or cartoons or blinking lights to entertain me. I didn't crave buttons or screens. I had the clouds, and they offered more than any show ever could. They gave me wonder. They gave me stories I made myself. And in doing so, they gave me something even greater, the ability to see magic in ordinary things. Sometimes, after watching the sky for what felt like both minutes and forever, I'd close my eyes and let the warmth of the sun melt into my skin. The clouds would drift behind my eyelids, still moving, still dancing. And when I opened them again, the world felt just a little softer, a little sweeter. I still look up at the sky now, even in this fast-paced world of glowing screens and crowded days. I try to find those shapes, to chase those drifting stories, like I used to. And while it's harder now, with the noise, the rush, the never-ending lists, when I lie in the grass and let myself be still, the clouds remember me. They come back slowly, changing and unfolding, reminding me that my imagination never really left. There were quiet moments when the laughter faded into the soft hum of the late afternoon, and the world outside the backyard seemed to slow, almost to a stop. It was in those tender pockets of stillness that a different kind of feeling crept in, a gentle ache, familiar but not heavy. It was sodade, though I didn't know the word back then. A sweetness mixed with longing, a missing that came not from sadness, but from love. That's when Grandma would bring out the stationery box. It lived in the bottom drawer of the hallway cabinet, beside some old address books and unused calendars from years past. The box was made of faded cardboard, covered in tiny roses, and when she opened it, the scent of old paper and lavender sachets would drift out, soft as a memory. Inside were cream-colored envelopes, smooth sheets of paper, a few stamps, and my favorite part, a bundle of colored pencils and pens held together with a rubber band that had long lost its stretch. "Would you like to write to your mom and Dad today?" Grandma would ask, her voice kind, knowing, and I'd nod, already sliding into the chair at the kitchen table, where the light poured in just right. Have you ever tried to fit an entire adventure into a single piece of paper? It was like trying to bottle sunshine. I'd start with "Hi Mom, hi Dad," and then launch into the day's events, each word tumbling over the next. I'd tell them about the tomatoes we picked, the butterfly I almost caught, the cloud shaped like a dinosaur that morphed into a hat. I'd try to make them laugh, just like they used to make me laugh during bedtime stories. I wanted them to feel the sun on their skin, the taste of popsicles on their lips, the hum of the fan lulling me to sleep, even from far away. Sometimes words weren't enough. That's when I reached for the colored pencils. I'd draw pictures instead, little scenes from my days, me and Grandma shelling peas on the porch, the corner store freezer bursting with popsicles, a cloud parade over a tiny version of her garden. I wasn't a great artist, but I drew with a kind of wild sincerity. Every shaky line, every smudged color carried pieces of my day, sealed in crayon and graphite. One time I drew a full comic strip, The Adventures of Popsicle Pete, a brave explorer who traveled the backyard in search of hidden treasures and secret recipes. I remember Grandma laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes with her apron. "They're going to frame that one," she said, as we folded it into the envelope. But not every letter was filled with jokes and colors. Some days the missing felt stronger, I'd write shorter sentences, then slower ones. I miss you, I'd scribble, pausing over the words. But I'm okay. Grandma makes the best toast. I'd draw hearts in the margins, little flowers, or stars, like a code they could read between the lines. I'm thinking of you. Come find me in my daydreams. Grandma never hovered as I wrote. She'd putter nearby, wiping the counter, humming softly, giving me the space to pour out what I needed. When I finished, I'd carefully fold the letter, sliding it into the envelope like a secret, and Grandma would help me address it. Her handwriting was perfect, neat looping letters that always reminded me of the recipe cards she kept in the metal box above the stove. We'd walk to the mailbox together, sometimes with the sun just beginning to dip behind the trees. I'd lift the little red flag with a sense of ceremony, like I was launching a message in a bottle out to sea. There was something sacred about it, that act of sending a piece of myself into the world, trusting it would find its way home. Have you ever written something so full of feeling you hoped the paper itself could carry the warmth of your hands? That's what those letters were, not just updates, not just doodles or drawings. They were bridges, small, colorful bridges, connecting my world at Grandma's to the world I had left behind. And every time I slipped one into the mailbox, I felt just a little lighter, like the space between us wasn't quite so wide after all. A few days later, an envelope would arrive with my name written in Dad's neat block letters, or Mom's looping, cursive. I'd tear it open right there on the porch. Inside would be a note, maybe a photo, sometimes even a joke from one of Dad's old comic books. And at the bottom, always, always, the words, "We miss you too. Can't wait to hear more." It was a rhythm all our own, a silent conversation between letters, colors, and memories. And even now, when I find old drawings tucked into boxes, or stumble on one of those envelopes saved between the pages of a book, I can still feel it, the ache, the love, the soft hum of the summer air pressing in as I wrote one more line, one more story, one more reminder that I was thinking of them always. The last light of the day would always come slowly, like a gentle yawn stretching across the sky. After dinner, usually something warm and simple, like Grandma's tomato soup with saltine crackers, or baked chicken with buttery corn on the cob, the house would quiet in the most comforting way. Not silent, but filled with soft sounds that felt like lullabies. The distant chirp of crickets just outside the window, the creak of floorboards under tired feet, the clink of dishes being washed with care. I'd already be in my pajamas by then, my skin still warm from the sun, my hair faintly smelling of grass and summer air. Grandma would hand me a glass of water and gently guide me to the couch or the front porch swing for a few last moments of slow breathing before the day officially ended. Sometimes we'd talk about what I wanted to dream about that night. Sometimes we'd say nothing at all, just sit together in the amber hush of a small world that didn't need anything more. My body would always feel heavy by that time, but it wasn't the weight of exhaustion. It was the fullness of living a day with no interruptions, no static, no blinking lights pulling me away from the present. It was the good kind of tired, the kind you earn by being alive in every small, beautiful moment. Soon, I'd make my way to the little room at the end of the hall, where the bed was already turned down and the sheets smelled like sunshine and line-dried cotton. The windows would be open just enough to let in the breeze, and the fan on the nightstand would hum softly, almost like a heartbeat, steady and soothing. Have you ever laid your head on a pillow knowing that nothing was left undone, that the day had given you exactly what you needed, even if it wasn't what you expected? That was how it felt each night at Grandma's house. No internet, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no screens glowing in the dark, just me, a blanket tucked under my chin, and a heart so full it almost ached. I'd lie on my back and think about everything, the garden soil still under my fingernails, the butterflies I tried to chase, the stories Grandma told while folding towels warm from the dryer. I'd picture the shape of the cloud that looked like a pirate ship, the way the popsicle melted faster than I could eat it, the silly face I drew for Dad, and the flower I colored in Mom's favorite shade of blue. And as my eyes fluttered shut, I'd whisper small thank yous to the dark dot. Thank you for the tomatoes, still warm from the vine. Thank you for the soft hum of the fan and the creak of Grandma's old rocking chair. Thank you for the walks to the store, for the crickets outside the window, for the letter that's on its way to Mom and Dad. Thank you for the quiet. Thank you for the love. It wasn't just a bedtime routine. It was a ritual, a moment where the day folded itself neatly and settled into my memory, each piece sliding into place like a puzzle that only made sense when seen from the warmth of the covers. I didn't need a nightlight. The moon was enough. I didn't need lullabies. The breeze told stories on its own. Some nights, Grandma would poke her head in before bed and kiss my forehead softly. "Good night, sweetheart," she'd whisper. "You were a joy today, just that. Not you were perfect, or you did everything right. Simply you were a joy." And in those words, I felt everything: safety, pride, and a love so steady it stayed with me long after the door clicked shut. Have you ever felt like the simplest days were the ones that etched themselves deepest into your soul? Those nights when the world was dark but not lonely, when my body was tired but not restless, when my heart was full but not heavy, were the ones I still carry with me. They live somewhere quiet inside me, a secret place I return to when the world feels too loud, too fast, too crowded with things that don't matter. Because those nights at Grandma's, far from any screen or device, were proof that we didn't need much to feel everything. A fan, a blanket, the echo of a story, the taste of something sweet still lingering, the echo of laughter in the hallway, the promise of morning and love in the quietest, strongest form. Now, when I close my eyes as an adult, chasing sleep after busy days filled with glowing rectangles and endless notifications, I sometimes wish I could fold myself back into that room, to listen to that old fan hum just once more, to see the moon casting soft shadows on the wall, to whisper thank yous into the dark with a child's belief that someone, somewhere, was still listening. But even now, I know it's all still. With me, the memories, the stillness, the joy. And as I drift to sleep each night, I carry that summer with me, the one spent without the internet, but with everything that really mattered.